Go ahead.
Today is Thursday, November 4th, 2010. This is the start of an interview with Mr. Donald Jardine at the RSVP offices of Catholic Services of Macomb, located at 26238 Ryan Road, Warren, Michigan. Mr. Jardine is 79 years old, born September 24th, 1931. Mr. Jardine currently resides at 24824 Audrey, Warren, Michigan. My name is Dave Brousseau and I will be the interviewer, and Miss Ann Bartlett will be the videographer. Mr. Jardine, would you state for the record the branch of service that you served?
The United States Air Force.
All right, let's start back in your high school days, if you can recall that far back, and kind of give us a little background, where you were born, where you went to school, how big was your family?
Okay, I was born in Detroit, Michigan. At the age of 2, my parents moved us to Warren, which was a township at the time. And we resided on Page Avenue, just west of Van Dyke, until I entered the military in 1951. In high school, I participated in baseball and football. I had a business administration course, performed in the senior class play as an English butler, and
Where'd you go to school?
St. Clement of Centerline.
Not too far from here.
Graduated in 1949 and entered the Air Force February 2nd, 1951.
How did you enter the Air Force? Was this an enlistment
Volunteer.
or
I volunteered.
why did you do that?
Well, I knew I was going to either be drafted or I would have to volunteer. So I decided if I was going to die in the military, I wanted to die with a clean shave and a full stomach, not in a foxhole full of ice and water and mud.
And apparently that was your vision of what would happen had you gone into the Army.
Many of my buddies ended up in water in foxholes, believe me, many of them.
Can you give us a picture of the era at 1951? What was going on in the world, as you recall it?
The Korean War was going on. The Korean War started 6 months before I entered the service. And, you know, well, I take it back, it wasn't a war, it was a police expedition.
Yeah, police action.
We always call it the Forgotten War.
Yeah.
And everyone at that time, my age, was either enlisting or getting drafted. So that was the big discussion among all of us, even in the pool hall.
Yeah, yeah, I can recall that.
You know,
You had a choice and go where you think you'd be better suited, or
well, you know, and another reason I joined the Air Force was I wanted to be on flying status. One way or another, not as a pilot because I didn't have a college education, but I would have liked to have been a radio gunner or something of that, or a crew chief on flying status, you know, something of that order. So that was really probably the biggest reason I went into the Air Force, because that was 4 years duty versus 2 years of in the Army.
yeah. What was your family situation?
Well, my father was a full-time bartender at Pastime Lanes at 9 Mile and Van Dyke for close to 25 years. Prior to that, he had worked during the World War II at Briggs Manufacturing Company in Detroit, which ended up being Chrysler Corporation. And my mother was an entertainer until my first grandchild was born, or her first grandchild, my oldest son, was born. And she retired from playing the drums in a band. but she was an entertainer with 3 other ladies.
How did she feel about you going in the service at that particular time?
She wasn't too happy about it, but my dad didn't seem disappointed or sorry that I was doing it, because he realized that I was gonna go one way or the other.
Right.
And he had volunteered for World War II, and he missed being old enough by 3 months. Because he volunteered the day after Pearl Harbor. And he was 3 or 4 months too old to be taken. So he ended up working 7 days a week, 10 hours a day, all through the war. And
Did you
I had
go
2
in
brothers.
feeling any fear or?
No, not really. I think I just went in with the anticipation of wondering what was going to happen to me, you know? Because just because I was in the Air Force did not mean I was not going to end up somewhere like Kimpo Airfield in South Korea during the combat phase of the war. So, you know, I had no idea where I was going to end up when I entered the Air Force. But,
So where was boot camp?
Sampson Air Force Base, Geneva, New York. I got there February the 2nd. There was 2 feet of snow on the ground. The chill factor was around 15 or 20 degrees below zero. I was in the 19th flight taken in there. There were 50 of us in the flight. So the base had just opened. There was no heat in the barracks. A few weeks before that, they had just kicked a bunch of homesteaders out of the barracks that were living in there. So we had no heat for the first 3 days. So what they did, they issued us all our gear, winter overcoats, galoshes, long johns, everything, fatigues, field jackets, and they gave us 7 blankets because we didn't have any mattresses either for the first 3 days. So we put one mattress under us, put all our clothes on that we could get on, and then covered up with the other 6 blankets for 3 nights. After 3 nights, we finally got coal in our furnace room. They were coal burners. And after that, it turned out to be pretty comfortable. And after many, you know, after the GI parties and everything, the barracks turned out to be halfway decent. You know, it wasn't bad. And our drill sergeant, well, flight leader, he was out of the 101st Airborne, and he re-enlisted in the Air Force, and he was our DI. He was probably 5'6" or 7", about 3 feet wide, and I think his eyeballs even had muscles. He was about as tough a nut as I ever came across, but just as fair as he was tough. You know, he was just that kind of a guy. He was really great, really. We all liked him.
Any memorable people or activities or events that occurred while you were at boot that are worth?
Well, while we were there, we ate very well. The Air Force feeds very well. But because of all the snow on the ground, and let me say, we had at least snow flurries every day for 11 weeks and 6 days. The only day I didn't see a snowflake come down was the day I left there, heading for Texas. The only day.
Is this upper New York?
Geneva, New York, it's, I'm going to say 40 miles from Buffalo. In the snow zone.
Okay.
We were right at the bottom of Seneca Lake, which is a very long lake, and the wind came off that lake, and it was just, oh man, it was just murder. It was really tough.
Okay, so you get assigned to Texas. What was the basis of that assignment, you know?
Well, we took a bunch of tests before we left basic training. Qualification tests.
Yeah.
In all the different fields the Air Force offered to us, like radio operators, radar, aircraft and engine mechanics, aircraft electrical, clerk typist, right down the line. Well, any of those courses that you got a score of 9 in, you could pick that any course you wanted that you had a 9 in. Well, I figured my best chance, and I'm not bragging, but I had all nines.
Good.
And I had 2 years of typing in high school, but I sure didn't want to be a clerk typist.
Right.
Although those guys got promoted faster than anybody in the field. You know, that's brown nose
And
country.
they didn't have to carry a gun, probably.
No, that's brown nose country. You know, you're sitting in the CO's lap. Who's gonna get the promotions first, you know? Anyway, I asked for a radio school. Sorry, son, we're overloaded. I said, well, they told me when I enlisted that whatever I wanted to do, if I scored high enough, I could get that. Sorry, son, they're overloaded. I said, okay, how about radar school? Sorry, son, we're overloaded. I said, what aren't you overloaded in? Well, aircraft and engine mechanics. I thought, well, that might be all right, because if I could get to be a crew chief on a bomber or a big cargo plane, I might be able to get flying status that way. So I said, okay, I'll take aircraft and engine school. Okay, good enough. So they shipped me from Sampson Air Force Base to Wichita Falls, Shepherd Air Force Base, Wichita Falls, Texas. The worst place I've ever been stationed in my life. I wouldn't recommend anyone get stationed there. They treated airmen like, well, a little better than dogs, but a little less than human beings. They actually had some stores in that town that had signs that said airmen and dogs keep out. I don't know if you believe that or not, but I witnessed it. And a little story, a friend of mine and I, in uniform, went into a bar in town after we got there to have a beer. We sat at that bar for at least 20 minutes waiting to get served. I would say 10 people came in after us that got served, and we still hadn't got served. And this friend of mine, he was from New Jersey, and he was a pretty tough dude. I think he came out of one of the gangs in Newark. But I said, man, let's get out of here. We'll go buy a bottle somewhere and go back to the barracks and party. The heck with this. He said, we're not leaving till we get a beer. He said, I'm telling you right now, we're not going anywhere. And the bartender heard him. So finally, he came over and he waited on us. We got the beers, we paid for them. My buddy took both those bottles and tipped them upside down on the bar like this. After he emptied them on the bar, he said, okay, Don, let's go get that bottle. So we walked out, and the bartender's hollering at us, and he just turned around, and I won't tell you what he said. It's not repeatable. So we went back to the barracks, and we hung out there, and lo and behold, they had 20,000 of us waiting to go to that aircraft and engine school. 20,000!
Wow.
So what eventually happened after, oh gosh, I guess we were there 3 to 4 weeks. And oh, it was cold, and you ate sand 24/7. The wind never stopped blowing. And in the morning at 5 o'clock, you got up, you got dressed. You dressed lightly, you went, well, you dressed heavy to go to chow, like a field jacket. And then right from there, you went on a drill field. Excuse me. By the time you got off the drill field, it was 90 degrees. And here you're wearing field jackets, coveralls, and dying from the heat. So then we decided to heck with that. We left our long johns off. We left our field jackets back at the barracks, and we just shivered for the first hour and a half or two. Anyway, it got to the point where they decided that they had to do something with all these guys waiting to go to that school, because it just wasn't going to happen. So they signed up a large number of civilian schools around the country. And then they took us into this big assembly hall, and we actually drew names of the school we were going to out of a hat. Believe it or not, out of a hat. You picked it out, you read it, and you told the guy who's holding the hat what you got. He wrote your name, Air Force number down, and lo and behold, I had to draw Sarasota, Florida. It was tough. It was a place called J&J Air Tech in Sarasota, Florida.
So now what What kind of training this is gonna be?
Aircraft and engine.
All
school.
the same.
Oh yeah, these are
But
all
just,
aircraft
there
and
wasn't
engine.
enough room there to do it.
Well, they just couldn't, the war had been over 10 years before they got everybody through it. Some guys went to Cheyenne, Wyoming, some went to Seattle, Washington,
Oh,
some went to Massachusetts, they went all over the country. So they sent about, let me tell you how many they sent. Got a picture of our crew there. I can tell you how many. I think I even numbered them. Here they are. Well, anyway, you can see them.
Hold it up for us.
That's the whole crew that went to Sarasota, Florida, Aircraft and Engine School.
And where are you in that picture?
I think I'm right down in the front. I think I'm right there, or close to it.
And that was like a graduation picture?
Well, I don't know. I can't remember whether it was graduation or just that the CO decided to get us all together and have a picture taken.
Yeah, there's about 30 there.
Now,
So now you're off to Sarasota.
I'm off to Sarasota on a troop train going from Texas to Sarasota with an overnight stay in New Orleans. Well, let me tell you, I don't know if you've ever been there, but boy, that is one whale of a town for a young single guy. I want to tell you, I had a blast. I had a heck of a hangover the next morning, but I had a blast that night. It was wonderful. Actually got to the French Quarter, and you cannot have a drink on every bar on Bourbon Street, I guarantee it. You can't take a shot in every bar on Bourbon Street. It's just not possible. At that time. I don't know. I haven't been there back since.
But you tried.
Well, absolutely. 19 years old? Absolutely. You know, I got all night to sleep before I get to Sarasota, you know, hangover or not. So anyway, we went to
Now,
school.
you didn't travel before you got into the service, so all of this was kind of new, huh?
Oh yeah, other than going up north for a week on a lake
Yeah.
for a vacation with my parents,
This was
I'd never
quite an
traveled anywhere.
experience for you already.
Oh yeah, I'd never what you'd call really been away from home. Well, absolutely. And when I got to Sarasota, we had the most wonderful duty in the world. We went to school 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. Our weekends were all our own. Our evenings were our own. No Class A inspections. All the CO told us was if he happened to go through the barracks, it better look very neat. But there will be no inspections. We had civilian cooks, civilian dishwashers.
Where did you were on base, but you went
This
to
wasn't
school.
even a base. This was this was an old World War II Air Force base that had been abandoned. And
So you had the meal.
yeah, we had a building where they served our meals, you know,
Oh, okay.
cooked, gave us our meals. As soon as our meals were done, we walked out to the highway, which is Tamiami Trail, US 41, put out our thumb, never had to wait more than 3-4 cars to get a ride, went right to the beach, Lido Beach, stayed there till dark, had a couple of drinks, thumbed our ride back. As long as you were in uniform, you got a ride.
So where did you go to school? Was
Right there, J&J Air Tech, right in Sarasota,
okay.
Florida.
So you recruited the schools to come in and do the training right there on the base?
No, the Air Force recruited the schools.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you know, Washington DC, they recruited the schools.
So how long were you in the school?
I was in the school from the end of May until the end of August. I think, I forget how many weeks that was. It was like 12 weeks, something like that. And then after we graduated from that, we all got split up. We got sent this way, all over the country. No one was shipped overseas yet. All my buddies here that I went to school with, we were all going to air bases in the U.S.
How did they determine?
I have no idea. They
Did
hand you a piece of paper that says orders.
Did you go through some kind of an evaluation at the end that told them where you were?
No, all they did, when we graduated from school, as long as we didn't flunk out, they just gave us a set of orders and said, you're going here, Don.
Okay.
Joe, you're going here. Gary, you're going there, you know.
So where did you go?
Well, I thought I had rough duty being in Sarasota. They shipped me to Las Vegas. Dulles Air Force Base, Las Vegas. Now, that, and they gave me 19 days to get there, and this is all train travel, by the way. So I had time to stop at home for 9 days. That's the first time I'd been home in 7 months. So I was very happy to be able to stop
You
at
didn't
home.
tell me about your family. How big was your family?
Mother, father, 2 brothers. One ex-Army, one ex-Navy.
So they were older than you?
No, younger. I'm the
Oh.
oldest. The youngest went into the Navy, and
So you were the first one that Mama had to lose, huh?
well, the other 2 were safe. There was nothing going on when the other 2 entered the service. The youngest brother went into the Navy for 4 years. The middle one got drafted, but peacetime drafting. I think 1955 or 56 he was drafted. There was nothing going on. That was before they repealed the drafting deal. So I got out to, and Nellis Air Force Base was a combat training base, and still is, as far as that goes, for pilots going to Korea. And other places, but basically going to Korea. It was combat training. They had air-to-ground missions, you know, bombing missions. They had air-to-air, which was shooting at tow targets, you know. And I was assistant crew chief on an F-84 Thunderjet fighter plane when I got out there. And I just happened to have a picture of my plane.
Oh. So what was your job?
I was the assistant crew chief on that plane. My job was to make sure it stayed clean and to crawl up into that tail cone and count the blades on that stator in there. And you know what a stator is, it's like a fan with
Right.
many, many, many blades on it where the thrust comes through from the engine.
This is still the straight wing aircraft.
Yep.
Before the,
Why
Just
don't you,
before the Saberjet.
yeah.
why don't you hold that up so I can see it?
I don't know if you can get a picture of that, that's pretty small.
Oh, we can zoom in pretty good.
Wait a minute.
Is this a better one?
See if I can straighten the picture up a bit so it won't.
Oh, yeah, oh, that's good. Yep, yep,
Okay.
okay. And the other one?
And then,
The
here,
other one is the same thing.
it's the same thing, but it's a closer view.
Okay, well, look at that.
See if I can get the bends out of it here.
Yep, that's good. Yep,
This was part of the F-80 Shooting Star or just after it?
This was after it.
Okay.
The F-80 was first, and then the F-84 came next,
You're right, okay, I remember now.
and then the 86 after that.
Yeah.
And we had a funny incident there. We had an Air National Guard unit that flew out of there with P-51 Mustangs. Well, they call them F-51s now, but they were
Yeah.
P-51s in those days.
Yeah.
And they were parked out at one end of the ramp from us. And they did their flying on weekends usually, but this young kid, you know, they sat like this because they had the rear wheel instead of the tricycle wheel.
Really? That's right,
Yeah.
that's right. That's
They
right.
sat like this, they didn't sit straight,
That's right.
luckily. Because we got a new kid out of armament school there, and he went out there and he armed those planes for their you know, bombing runs and
Yeah.
machine gunning runs and whatever. And he was right fresh out of school. And what they did, they armed the planes on the squadron area, and they don't allow them to be able to fire until they get out to the takeoff
Uh-huh.
ramp. So that kid has to go out there and arm that plane. Well, apparently he forgot about that. Pilot got in, one of the pilots got in, inadvertently squeezed the trigger, and he had 50 millimeters going over the entire squadron area,
Oh my.
but out into the boondocks. Nobody got a scratch. overshot all those jet fighters. He could have destroyed half the jet fighters we had on that place. But anyway, he got 3 years in Leavenworth for dereliction of duty.
Wow.
I think he was 18 years old, 18 or 19 years old.
Now, they still flew Mustangs and Corsairs in the Korean, part of the Korean War, didn't they?
Yeah, I think they did.
Certain areas?
You know, they use them for, I think they used them for close ground support,
Okay,
you know.
yeah.
But most of the time at the beginning they used the F-80s and the 84s. And then the Sabres came in to take on the MiG-20s, MiG-19s.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
it was, I really loved it out there. I wanted to spend my whole career out there.
Yeah,
I
sure.
really didn't want to leave.
Now, what was your job at the, you were talking about crawling in the
Well-
exhaust flume?
You had to pull safety checks on the plane to make sure it was going to come back when you sent it out.
You were talking earlier, what was,
Well, you went in there with a flashlight and you had to look at every one of those blades, and if one had a crack, that plane was sent into
but what did they call that? You said that
it was just an inspection, pre-flight.
this was mechanic.
This was a pre-flight inspection by the crew
Okay,
chief
but
and the
your-
assistant crew
Your
chief.
position was as a aircraft mechanic?
Right,
Okay.
right. And the few months I was there, I never found a thing wrong with our plane. But I learned one thing, pilots are very suspicious. If you put the ladder on the right-hand side of the plane, that plane will never take off the ground that day.
Really?
That pilot will turn around, go right back to base operations,
You know,
and tell the CO,
not
I'm not
surprising.
flying that plane and I don't give a damn what you do. Pardon my French. They just, that ladder goes on the left side or that plane does not leave the ground. They're that superstitious.
You know, you never hear that or see it, but every once in a while someone tells you about these
Well, I'll tell you what, we had a guy in our flight.
superstitions that go on that are kind of,
We had a kid in our flight who was just out of one of the schools too, on another aircraft in our area here in our squadron. And he was kind of a jokester, so he thought he was going to be funny. We put the ladder on the right-hand side of his pilot's plane. The pilot came out, took one look at it, turned around, went back to base operations, and that lucky guy got 14 days of hard labor. And he only had one stripe to begin with, and he didn't have any when he came back. So, I'm sure he learned a lesson. He learned a lesson. But I loved it out there. I mean, I loved the weather. It was 115 degrees because I was out there, you know, June, July, August. But I loved it. And our barracks were air conditioned, which they had to be. I mean, man, it just...
so
you
what
couldn't-
kind of duty did you have there?
Just take care of that aircraft. That's it.
One aircraft?
One aircraft. Two men taking care of an aircraft. When the pilot got out there, that plane had to be running and ready to go. So either myself or the crew chief would hook up the APU and crank it up and let her sit there and idle till he got there. Usually they carried about 600 gallons of fuel.
Now, where would those aircraft go from there after the training?
Oh, the aircraft stayed there. They sent the pilots.
Okay,
The pilots shipped out. The aircraft didn't go anywhere because you had more pilots coming in to train.
okay.
And we trained Greek pilots, Belgian pilots,
Oh, wow.
pilots from all over NATO. I mean, all over the Allied, you know, the people that were fighting, well, NATO. The people that were fighting over there, well, we had pilots coming in from different places, different countries.
Did you have time to do any traveling on your time off, or?
I went to LA one weekend, and I decided that, gee whiz, I'm in a hot Detroit. I'm not coming back here ever again. I hated it.
Really?
Yeah, they can keep California. If I'm gonna be hot, it's gonna be Florida, it's not gonna be California.
Did you get to see any other parts of the country?
No, not while I was there.
And how long were you there?
3 months.
3 months.
And then I got called into the first sergeant's office. And he says, I've got orders for you. I said, well, here we go. Korean bound, probably. He handed me my orders. And it said Chanute Air Force Base, Rantoul, Illinois. And I looked and it said Aircraft Electrical School. I said, Sarge, what's that for? He said, you're going to school. I said, I just got out of school. He said, guess what? You're going to school again. I said, I don't want to go to that school. I said, I love what I'm doing. He says, son, you're in the military. They hand you orders, you just follow them, like it or not. I almost asked to see the CO, but I knew it'd be useless. If the first sergeant tells you you're going, you know you're going. So, I headed to Chanute Air Force Base, the Aircraft Electrician School. So I got through that. That was 8 weeks. Yeah, that was 8 weeks. So at the end of 8 weeks, everyone who had a 3.5 and up, they got into this huge room, and some 5-striper tech sergeant was up above in front of us, and he said, we now only have one shift at this school. We want to put on a second shift. We need instructors. Would any of you gentlemen like to volunteer to stay here and teach? Everyone just looked at everyone and thought, well, I want to get out of this rat hole. And all of a sudden one guy said, where are we going if we don't stay here? He said, well, he said, I can almost guarantee your first stop will be Okinawa. Your second stop might be Japan, but that'll be very short. And your third stop will be Kimpo Airfield, South Korea. And you guys know what they're doing in South Korea? The gooks are overrunning that base pretty regularly. And you know when you get there, you got to pull your share of guard duty at night. He said, now, are there any volunteers to stay here? I guess about 20 of us went like this. And my buddy says, you know, he says, if I'm going to get killed, it's not going to be, it's not going to be my choice. If I can avoid it, I'm going to avoid it. I said, amen, brother. I said, if we have to go, we have to go. But I'll be damned if I'm going if I don't have to.
So now the instructors would have been instructing what you just finished learning.
Exactly, exactly. We went to instructors training.
Okay, how was this activity different than what you were doing before?
Well, this was all electrical now.
Okay.
I was teaching electrical systems now, after I got through school. So I had to go to instructor school, finish instructor school. So they start you out teaching electrical fundamentals, you know, Ohm's law, you know, how do you arrive at watts, volts, amps, you know, basics, batteries. So you teach that for a while. As it turned out, I ended up teaching that for a year. And then our CO, who was a chief warrant officer, came up to me and he said, you ready to get out of that fundamental class? I said, oh, warrant officer Harvey, I'm ready. I said, this is the most boring thing in the world. He said, well, he says, I'm going to send you up, you can teach electronic fuel control systems for the F-86. I said, okay. He said, all right, he says, I want you to go and take the class over again. He says, you had it once, go take it again. Draw up your lesson plans for the class, bring them to me, I want to see what they look like. If I approve them, we'll give you a class. So that's what I did. And up until well, in 1953 I got married.
Where did she come from? We haven't talked about her.
Her and I went to school together for 12 years.
Oh.
And I never dated her till the senior prom, ever. And that was the end of that when I did that. She was a farmer's daughter, so she's a great cook. You know my wife, right? She's a great cook. And she comes from a family of 10 kids, all surviving so far. And all pretty healthy so far, actually. Anyway, we got married at home at St. Clement in Centerline, September 12th, 1953. The same day that Jackie and Jack got married. The same day. So I had a leave, so we took 2 weeks, went to Florida, to Daytona Beach on our honeymoon. Then we came back. I brought her home, I went back to the base and started looking for some housing for us, you know, an apartment. So I found an apartment. So I took a weekend and I came back and got her. The apartment was furnished. So I called her ahead and, you know, and told her, pack your things and coming home to get you. So a year later, my oldest son was born at the base hospital. And it was back in the days where in normal hospitals, a woman had a baby and she'd probably be there a week to 10 days before they release her, you know. Well, my wife had her baby at 11:30 on a Sunday morning. And I was there about, I don't know, 1 o'clock. And she said to one of the nurses, when are they going to feed us? Oh, if you're hungry, no problem. Just get up and go down there to the cafeteria and get your food. My wife says, what do you mean get up and go down there? You don't think we're going to bring it to you, do you? We don't do that. You get up and you go get it yourself. And that's what they do nowadays, you know, they ship you out right away now. Because you don't get weak that way from just laying in bed, I guess. I don't know what it is, but apparently it's therapeutic. Whatever it is, so that's what she did. She got up and went and got herself something to eat. And she was home in 3 days. And by this time, I was working in the test lab. I got into this test lab because the guy running it became a good friend of mine. And I told him, I said, you know, I'm getting tired of teaching. I'd like to do something, get out of here or do something. He said, you want to work in the test lab? I said, yeah. He said, well, I'm one short. He said, let me talk to the warrant officer. So he got me in there, and it was testing all these students, final, you know, for their final grade, their final troubleshooting tests. You just flip a switch and throw a trouble into this electronic board, and then that student had to figure out what the problem was, you know, and solve it. And that was great. But when my wife had her baby, the head of our lab, he says, look, he says, you stay home with your wife. I'll let you know when to come back. I said, really? He says, we'll cover for you. He says, I'll let you know. And he lived in this. I lived in Champaign-Urbana, where the University of Illinois is. In fact, I lived almost across the street from the campus. So he'd stop every other day, see how I'm doing, let me know everything's fine. And after 2 weeks, he can stop by one day and he says, hey Don, he says, you about ready to come back? I said, yeah. I said, you want me back, man? I'm ready. He said, because I got one of the guys would like to take a week off. He says, you know, we can't cover for 2 guys at once. That's too many hours for the guys to work. So I went back. The next guy went off. It was wonderful. But I worked a part-time job after I rented that apartment. I worked a part-time job putting coal in stokers in the co-ed's dorms at the University of Illinois. That got me $20 a week. And that's big money for me. When you're living on $212 a month total.
What was your rent?
Oh gosh.
50, 60 bucks a month?
Probably, yeah. Probably $50 a month. When my wife was working, my landlady lived downstairs, we were upstairs. She babysat my son, so my wife could work for 50 cents an hour in a department store.
Wow.
And I made $20 a week, filling probably, I don't know, 12 or 15 stokers twice a week. Walk through the basement in those dormitories, and those co-eds are down there in pants and bras doing their laundry and whatever down there. They don't even know you exist. You go down there, you fill the stoker, go out. I don't think they even realize you're even there. Don't pay any attention. They don't say hello, goodbye, or...
Weren't the stokers that big pot where you dump the coal and then the auger
took it in.
Take it in,
right.
Automatically feed the furnace?
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember that.
Oh yeah. Yep. So that's where I spent my career. The biggest part of my career was at Chanute Air Force Base. And I was discharged. I joined the Air Force with 3 other guys. They all went to clerk typist school. And they got out 6 months before I did. When I found out they got out, I went to my CO and I said, hey, Warrant Officer Hardy, I got 3 buddies that enlisted the same day as I did. And they got out of the service. I said, what am I doing here? He said, Don, I hate to tell you this, but you have a critical MOS. I said, you gotta be kidding. He said, no. He says, your MOS is critical. You're here for the duration, son.
Yeah.
So I spent 4
Oh, that's
years
not
right
that
to the
bad.
day. Well, I didn't, you know.
I mean, in your situation, you didn't have really a,
I love the Air Force. I gripe like every other GI in the world, but I really like the service. I was happy that I enlisted in the Air Force.
did you make any friendships that you were able to take with you?
Yeah, well, while we were married, we had two of my buddies and their wives. We got together every Saturday night practically, and we enjoyed a 6-pack of Pepsi and a bag of potato chips, because we couldn't afford too much, you know,
Yeah.
and played cards. That was our Saturday nights. And I've only seen 2 of the guys I served with since I got out. One worked for, one was from Louisiana, but he worked for Shell Oil in northern Canada. And he married a Canadian girl. And the other guy that we hung out with, he was a commercial sewing machine repairman in New York City before he went into the military. But then he went to California after he got discharged, and we never heard from him again. I tried to get a hold of him, but I couldn't. But this guy from Canada, one time he came in, I don't know, 20 years ago, 15 years ago. I had a phone call, and his name was D. Holder, short for Duvernay. And he called and he said, hey Don, is this you? And I said, yeah, who's this? And he still had his Louisiana drawl after all these years. He says, it's D. I said, man, how are you? I said, man, you sound like you're next door. I said, you must have a great connection up there in Canada. He said, I am next door. I said, what do you mean you're next door? He said, I'm at the Holiday Inn on 9 Mile and John R.
Oh, wow.
I said, you're kidding. I said, yeah, I'm about 4 miles from you. He said, well, come on over. I said, okay. He said, we'll have dinner. I said, well, I'll tell you what, I'll come over, then my wife and I will take you out to dinner. We'll go back to my house and pick up my wife. Yeah, okay. So I got over there, he had a nice bottle of Crown Royal, and we sipped a few. And then we went back, got my wife, and we had a good time. It's the last time I saw him. Last time I heard, though, his wife was really, really crippled up with arthritis. I mean, really bad. I don't even know if she's alive anymore.
Now, your commitment was 4 years, right? What was the status of the Korean War
It ended 6 months before I got out.
6 months before you got out?
It started 6 months before I went in, and it ended 6 months before I got out.
And you were in for the full 4-year commitment, huh?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Now, where were you when you finished up?
I was at Chanute Air Force Base.
Okay.
Yep.
Now, what do they do when you're...
They just send you through finance to get your money, you know, and your discharge papers,
And they just say goodbye?
Bye-bye, yeah.
Do they
Yeah,
do
bye-bye.
you get transportation back home, or?
No, you're on your own.
You're
When
on
you
your
go out
own.
that gate, you're a civilian. You're on your
So,
own.
what are you gonna do? You're married, you got one little
I
one?
went back to the job I had. I went back to Jones and Laughlin Steel Corporation and worked 7 days a week and made a decent wage. Made a good living for a change.
Was there anything in your training in the Air Force that helped you with your job?
Well, I thought there was. When I got back to the steel mill, we had a bidding system. If a job came open, a bid was put up within the department that job was in. And if no one signed for that job within, I forget what it was, 9 days or something like that, it went plant-wide. And if they couldn't fill it from plant-wide, then they hired from the street. It was a union deal, you know, commitment, they were negotiable deal. So one day, Class A electrician came up on the board, plant-wide. So I said, wow, I said, that sounds like a pretty nice deal. So I went and signed the bid. So the superintendent of the electrical department, and I knew they already had hired an electrician, by the way. They already had, because he ended up in my department. I went to see the superintendent of the electrical department, and he said, what makes you think you're qualified? I said, well, I taught electrical systems for 3 years. I said, I kind of figured that might make me qualified. He says, well, have you ever been an electrician in a steel mill before? I said, no. I said, but you know what? Neither have any of your electricians, because they all started out in the labor gang here, just like I did. I said, so I'm no different than they are. They all went through the apprenticeship. Well, he says, we got to have someone with experience. Well, one of his foremen were sitting there working on a piece of electrical equipment. So I said, well, okay. And as I walked by, I said, hey buddy, this guy's a supervisor. I said, you got that upside down right there. It was a rectifier. He was putting it together wrong. I said, you got that wrong there. That's upside down. And I walked out of the office. Sure enough, following Monday, here come an electrician off the street into my department, of all things. He was a nice guy, I mean. But you know what? I ended up being better off. I ended up being assistant superintendent of the rolling mills at Jones and Laughlin Steel Corporation. Ended up being a lot better off.
Did you get out before they closed it down?
I got out when they closed it down.
Oh.
I retired May the 15th, 1983.
Oh.
They gave me a choice of Cleveland or Pittsburgh. And I was 51, and I was going to retire at 55 anyway, because I'd already had 33 years seniority. And I just said, why would I want to uproot my family for 4 years? Or why would I want to go rent a room 4 or 5 nights a week and then come home every weekend? I don't think so. I said, how much is my pension? And the guy told me. I said, well, show me the dotted line with you and let me use your pen because I'm out of here. So I retired. Then I worked here as a custodian at St. Cletus for a couple of years. Then I worked for my daughter's husband up in Flint in the construction business for a couple of years as a construction supervisor up there. And then I drove trucks for 18 years after that. I started out driving for Penske Trucking. I drove there 3.5 years. Then I went with a company called Hewlett Body Company in Detroit, and I drove for them for 15 years. And their business got so bad I retired myself. I said, it's about 3 years ago. I said, you know, 75 is time to retire. So now I put up with, my wife puts up with me.
And you
We put up with each other.
and you play a little pool.
4 days a week. Just in the mornings. From 8:30 till 10:30, 11 o'clock.
What do you do?
Shoot pool.
Oh. Is there any money in that?
No, we don't play for money.
Oh.
Two of the days are pool leagues, and the other 2 days are practice days. And we just play for fun.
When you got out of the Air Force, wasn't there an opportunity for the GI Bill yet? Was that still in effect? I think it was.
Yes, there was an opportunity, but it's hard to take advantage of the GI Bill when you've got a wife and a
I
kid.
forgot about that, yeah.
You got a wife and a kid. If I didn't have the kid, I would have definitely taken advantage of it. But it's tough with a wife and a
A
kid.
lot of kids from my day, this was the stimulus that really made it worthwhile because they could go back to school that they otherwise wouldn't be able to do.
The only good thing I got out of the government was I got a GI loan for 4 3/4% when I bought my house. Other than that. Oh, and I also found out some years back that my prescriptions, you know, I take prescriptions for cholesterol and blood pressure, you know, like everybody my age probably. And a buddy of mine, he says, how much you paying for your prescriptions? I told him, he says, man, he says, why don't you go down to Veterans— you should get them there for $7 a month for each prescription. I said, really? He said, yeah. He said, all you do is go down there, make an appointment, go down there. They'll give you a physical. They'll write your prescriptions out. You go downstairs to the pharmacy, pick them up, give them $7 for each one, and have a nice day. I said, really? He said, yeah, I'm not kidding you. So I did. But now my prescriptions are all generic. And believe it or not, they're actually cheaper at Kmart than they are getting them from the GIs. From
Really?
the hospital, yep. I get them for $4.50 now, each. It's $8 at the Veterans Hospital. But now, if you ever had to take one of those cancer pills that cost $300-400 a piece, you can get them for $8.
Yeah. That's nice.
Which would be that'd be a heck of an advantage. But, and that is a beautiful, I don't know if you've ever been in Veterans Hospital down there on John R.
Yeah.
That is a beautiful place. It's beautiful.
While you were in the service at those various locations, were you ever able to go to one of these USO shows or the entertainment?
They brought them to us at Nellis. They brought entertainers into the NCO club at Nellis for us to see. And also, a point of interest, I was there when they set off that nuclear bomb in Frenchman Flats in Nevada.
Oh, really?
I was in Las Vegas. I was at Nellis.
Who were some of the entertainers that you had a chance to see? Anybody of note?
How about Sinatra,
Oh, I seem to remember him.
Dean Martin?
Oh, really?
You know, we had a system. What we did, you had to know somebody to get into those shows, basically.
Really?
If you were an officer, you could get in. So sometimes I'd be Captain Jardine. One of my buddies would be Major Joe Blow, another guy. And we'd call and make a reservation. And we'd go in civilian clothes, so they didn't know whether we were captains, majors, or what we were, but we got into the shows. And at that time, you could see that whole show for a $60 drink. A 60-cent drink. Eyeball
right?
cost you 60 cents. Sit there and watch that whole show and spend 60 cents. And there was no charge to get in those days.
Huh.
But
Well,
they
that wasn't
expected you
much
to
of
drink
a-
when you were in there, you know.
That wasn't much of a jaunt for those guys to tape. They were, most of them, performing right there on the strip.
Sure, they were out of Hollywood, you know. A lot of them were out of California.
Yeah,
A lot of them were on the strip semi-permanently almost, you know.
yeah.
You know, when I was there were only 5 hotels on that strip.
Oh, is that right?
It was almost 3 miles of desert to go from downtown Vegas to the strip. It was almost 3 miles of desert. If you'd only known and bought a few acres of that sand
Oh, for sure.
between town and the strip, I wouldn't be here talking to you. I'd probably be a hotel owner.
Yeah, yeah.
But, yeah. See, Nellis, at that time, Nellis was about, oh, I forget, 6 or 7 miles out of downtown Vegas. So you either had to get a ride with one of the guys that had a car, or you had to thumb your way in. But most of the permanent guys there had cars, so you could always get a ride in, because somebody was always going into Vegas at night. But we basically only went in on the weekends anyway, because, you know, we had limited amount of money. At that time, I was making $82.50 a month. By the time you buy all your toiletries, cigarettes, and, you know, all the stuff you need for the month, you didn't have a whole lot left.
But didn't you buy, eat at the base?
Oh, absolutely. But you
There
know,
were some things
Well,
sort
you-
of free. Or,
you could get steak and eggs for 99 cents in that town then.
oh, gosh.
You could get steak and eggs, 99 cents, no problem. Yeah, it was no problem. But yeah, we ate on the base. I don't remember ever eating down in Vegas.
Yeah.
Because I never stayed overnight in Vegas. I always came back the same day, same
And I
night I went
expect
down
you
there.
could shop at the base also.
Oh, absolutely,
Yeah.
sure. PX, yeah. But you know, when they detonated that nuclear bomb, the Army brought 14,000 troops into Vegas.
Wow.
And we were restricted to the base. See, the base commander said there will be no airmen in Las Vegas this weekend, this coming weekend. We don't need any incidents with the Army. So they restricted us to the base, but they brought us entertainment out to the NCO club anyway, so, you know, 2 bits for a beer, what the heck.
It's amazing when you think back what those prices were today.
Dime for a pack of cigarettes. Now they're $7 and something, I guess, for a pack of cigarettes.
22 cents for a gallon of gas.
Oh yeah, something like that. Yep.
But everything was the same. The pay wasn't very big and, you know,
If you had enough stripes, you were doing very well. When I got out, I was an airman first class. I was a buck sergeant. But once you got past that point and got your first rocker, second rocker, master sergeant, those guys made decent money. I guess now they really make decent money, but oh, another funny thing, before they discharged me, they called me in, the CO called me in and asked me if I wanted to re-up. And I said, no, I don't think so. I said, man, I said, Captain, I just can't live on this, on what I'm making here. I said, you know, 200 some dollars a month. You said, doesn't get it. I'm working a part-time job nights. I said, no. I said, my job back home's working 7 days a week. I said, and I can take home more there in 1 week than I can clear here in 2 weeks. So I said, I don't think so. He says, well, you know, he says, if you re-enlist for 6 years, we'll give you $1,200. I said, really?
that's a one-time block, eh?
I said, let's see. I said, 6 years into 1,200. Is that 200 a year, or am I figuring wrong? I said, I can make that in 2 weeks at home. What you're going to give me for a year, I can make in 2 weeks at home. I said, why would I even consider that? I said, but I'll tell you what. You put me on flying status right now, and I'll re-enlist for 6 years. I said, you get me into gunnery school so I can get on flight status. I said, I'll re-enlist right now. If you show me I'm going to gunnery school, give me the orders for gunnery school. I said, I'll re-up right now. I don't care about the 1,200 then. Because you got 50 bucks a month for flying, you know. And I wanted to fly all the time I was in the military. He says, I can't do that. I said, well, I can't either then. Have a nice life, Captain. I'm going home. So on the way out, I got my discharge papers. I went over to finance, showed them those, got my money, and say la vie.
What do you get when you leave?
Just whatever money you got
$100
coming.
or,
Whatever, well, you get your month's pay
yeah,
for your last month. And then you get, I think it was, they allowed me, I think it was 3 days to get home. So they gave me $9 a day per diem for food.
that was it, eh?
Yeah. Have a nice life. But like I said, I really liked it. I have no complaints whatsoever. Do I miss Korea? Not a bit. Would I have gone? Absolutely. But not voluntarily.
Well, when you stop and think of how many people that went into the Air Force that ended up in Korea, it seemed like you lived a charmed life in being able to locate in the U.S. and
Well, you know,
get some of the training that you got, because I know the training in the service has always been pretty high ranked.
yes. I had two friends that were teaching with me. They got bored out of their skull, decided they were getting out of there. Well, Far East Air Force was always open. All you do is walk in and say, I want to transfer, and you were gone. So we told those guys, said, you know, you guys are going to end up in deep doo-doo over there. I said, because you know they're going to ship you there. We don't care. We got to get out of here. Well, about 3 months later, one of the guys got a letter from one of those guys. The two of them were out on the line guarding these fighter planes at night, and they got infiltrated, and both of them got stabbed.
Ooh,
And they both lived, luckily. They both got stabbed. That's how close the gooks got to them, and they didn't even know they were there. Had no idea they were even there. And they stabbed them both. You know, they didn't want to shoot guns because
Yeah.
you'd wake up the whole base. They stabbed these guys. And I said to the guys that were still with me, I said, and you guys want to get out of here? Go ahead, man. Be my guest. If they send me, it's not gonna be voluntarily. No way. So that's my highfalutin military career. Came home, had 2 more kids. All graduates of Michigan State University.
Good for you.
Their spouses are all graduates of Michigan State University. And right now I have 8 grandchildren, 6 of them in college. And next year I'll have 8 of them in college. All 8 will be in college. 7 out of the 8 will be in college next year. Because I have 2 that are seniors right this year. And my oldest grandson graduated from Michigan State. I think my youngest daughter is going to go to Michigan State, I believe. His other daughter's at Ohio State. I have 1 at Kansas, 2 at Kansas State, 1 at Chicago College of Art. And my grandson, who just graduated with a political science degree, he's working for a law firm as a clerk right now. And then he's taking a year off, and then he's going to law school. So, not bad for a guy with a high school education.
For sure.
Pretty good.
Well, my oldest son's a professor at Kansas State University.
Really?
Yeah, he's the state plant disease expert for grain crops. My youngest son's the vice president with True Green Chemlon in Maryland.
They did okay.
And my daughter works for Health Media in Ann Arbor, and she's got a super job there. In fact, she just signed up Navistar as one of her customers. She works for Health Media, is owned by Johnson & Johnson Pharmaceuticals. And her and her partner in crime, they just signed up Navistar, which is one big corporation. They build the international trucks and whatever else. So that was kind of a feather in their hat. So she's doing very well. She's got a beautiful condo in Ann Arbor. Her daughter's the one going to the Chicago School of Art. She's very artistic. So they're all doing well. I don't have to worry about them asking me to loan them any money because I don't have any to loan because I'm just an old retiree, you know.
Yeah.
I'm spending my inheritance. I'm spending their inheritance.
Good for you.
After 25 or 26 years ago in Florida, we finally decided no more Florida. My wife ended up in the hospital there this spring. And they told her she had malnutrition. Her blood pressure was going nuts up and down. And so they blamed part of it on malnutrition. Now, I don't know why. Well, she never drank much water, but I don't drink much water either. I hate water. But anyway, they got her blood pressure stabilized. They got her filled up with saline solution. And we got home. She said, no more. I'm not going to Florida anymore. If I'm going to be in the hospital, it's going to be here in Michigan. It's not going to be down there. And not to mention, we froze our butts off February and March. It was so cold down there. It was miserable.
Yeah.
It was cold. So I said, 26 years, I guess I'm satisfied with that. So now I'll have to run my own snow blower. But I still don't cut my own grass. I gave that up. I let somebody else cut the grass. So anyway.
Any other experiences you'd like to share with us?
I don't know.
Sounds like you're one of the chosen few that had a pretty nice experience in the service during
I was very lucky.
wartime.
I was very fortunate. Very fortunate. I mean, you know, how many guys can say, well, other than basic training, which was really miserable, can say that all their tough duty was Florida, Las Vegas, you know. Well, Central Illinois, there's only one good thing about it. It's only 2 hours from Chicago, and boy, you can party down there.
Yeah, I'm sure.
I'm a jazz fan. I'm a jazz nut. So I used to go to Chicago every other weekend with some buddies and go to the jazz clubs. You get a beer for $1. But if you sat down, you had to pay $2. As long as you stood at the bar, it was $1. And watch some of the greatest jazz musicians in the world, like Stan Kenton, if you ever heard of him. Dizzy Gillespie,
Yes,
all
sir.
kinds of them. Oscar Peterson. So anyway, that's about
All
the
right.
end of that story.
Well, thank you, sir.